What we're here to talk about is editing enhancing portraits with Photoshop CS6. I've had a lot of fun with CS6. There's some cool new stuff in it, and we're going to get right into it. I'd like to thank first our sponsor. Our sponsor today is X-Rite, and X-Rite has really made my life a lot easier with the ability to have my whole system color managed. And what that really means is, kind of in layman's terms, is the prints that I get back look like the images I see on the screen, and that is really important. In fact, before I go any further, I'm just going to jump into, let me open a new window here. I want to show you something on X-Rite Photo because a couple of important things. One here, where the webinars live, and also where you can register if you wanted to join me again this afternoon. So if you go into the Learning tab on X-Rite Photo and go to Webinars, and you'll see the webinars. Now here's today's webinars listed. Here's the one we're on right now. Here's the 1 o'clock. So if you do have a lot of fun today and you want more, just go to here to register. Again, it's free and it'll be a lot of fun. Also, webinars that have happened in the past live right here. It's a little bit hidden, but this little thing right here where it says Webinar Archived is where the recorded webinars live. So that's where you can go ahead and view them. This is where previous webinars live, and you see I did a couple in landscape editing in both Photoshop and Lightroom recently. So just to let you know, that's where that stuff lives. I'm your host today. If you haven't joined me before, my name is Joe Brady. I am the Webinar Marketing Manager at the Mac Group. I'm also a photographer, and I've been living, breathing, and training in Photoshop for, scary to say, it's just past 20 years. So it's hard to believe a time without Photoshop. It's kind of like a time without cell phones. So here's what we're going to talk about today. First, I mentioned color management. I'm going to give you just a brief overview on this because it is really important, because hopefully what you guys are after is you want to make prints. You want to have either you're going to print it yourself or you're going to send it out to a lab. And for that to consistently happen so that your images look like they do on the screen, you got to have your monitor calibrated and profiled. I'm not going to actually go through the process. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the hardware and software involved. Then I'm just going to real briefly go into the color settings in Photoshop. This probably deserves a whole webinar of its own where I would talk about color settings and workflow and color spaces and profiles, because a lot of folks are confused about that, but I'm just going to go over some basics. Then we get into the meat. Then we're going to go over some portrait edits. And as I mentioned, I have way more prepared for you than I can show today, so the edits I do this afternoon at 1 o'clock, again, if you'd like to rejoin me, are going to be completely different than the ones I show you this morning. And then lastly, just a quick view of the soft proofing process where you get to see how your print's going to print before you print it. And that's where the profiles come in. So in essence, what we're after today is we want to turn a good image. We want to turn an image that actually came right out of the camera, as this one did, looking pretty good, and we want to turn them into something really special. So that's what we're here for today. And that's actually one of the first demonstrations I'm going to do for you today. So I mentioned solid foundation. You've got to have your monitor calibrated and profiled. Think about it. Your monitor is your single most important piece in this whole editing process because it's where you're making your decisions. If your monitor is not set correctly, if it's not accurately showing you the right color, the tone, the brightness, the contrast range, then the edits you're making are guesses, and they're according to the monitor, not what's really in the file. And what happens all the time, and I hear this from a lot of my wedding photographer friends, they get prints back that look darker than they do on the screen, or there's a slight color shift. If you get the hardware and software to do this, it will take care of that for you. Now, there's a whole range of different solutions. Again, I'm not going to actually demonstrate the products today. There are webinars for this, which we will send you links for after the webinar completes today. But moving from left to right, we've got the ColorMonkey display, the i1 Display Pro, the ColorMonkey Photo in the middle, and then the i1 Photo Pro on the right. A complete range from relatively inexpensive to the absolute highest end professional systems. All depends on what your needs are and where your prints are being done. And just before we get into Photoshop, this question always comes up, so I always want to answer it. Folks are confused with the two ColorMonkey names, the difference between the display on the left and the ColorMonkey Photo on the right. They both do monitor calibration and profiling. They both can profile digital projectors. What the ColorMonkey Photo on the right adds is the ability to create custom printer profiles for your printer. so that you have an exact picture of how your printer prints colors, and that's what the difference is. If you're interested in more about this, again, we'll send you links on the webinar archive where I've done webinars on both of these devices. So really what these devices allow you to do is you're no longer guessing. What you're seeing on the screen is true and accurate to the file, so you can go ahead and do your portrait edits in Photoshop and know that what you do to the image is actually going to show up when you go out to print. Okay, let's jump into Photoshop CS6. If you haven't actually seen the box, that's it. I know many of us have just downloaded it and activated it that way. So Adobe's getting into slightly weird images, both Photoshop and Lightroom. So let's jump into CS6 here, and I've got an image waiting for us. Now this is the image right out of the camera. And yeah, the exposure's good. You can see the histogram up here. Everything's lovely. But we want to take it, as we kind of saw earlier, from a good image to really a image that's above average. And that's really the reason for that is you want to create above average images, because then your clients are going to love it, and happy clients mean more print sales. So first, I took a look at this image, and the first thing I want to do is attack bigger items, and then I'll work my way down into the finer things. And the first thing I kind of noticed was, this is my friend Bethany here, I noticed that I thought this shoulder was sticking up a little too far. I just wanted to push it down a little bit. So in the past I used to use the liquify tool, but no more, I don't use that anymore. Let's do it a different way. So I'm going to bring up the lasso tool, which is right here, and I'm going to kind of draw down the middle of her arm and give myself a little bit of background to play with. And I'm going to copy, Command C, copy and paste that onto a new layer. Let me actually choose the right layer, copy paste, and you see this new layer 5 show up. In fact, let me trash my old one here. In fact, if I turn off the background, you can see that's what I just copied onto this new layer. And how I like to do my body shaping is to use the warp tool. So let's go ahead, and with that layer checked, go to Edit, Transform, Warp. And Warp gives you this grid over which you can drag any of these lines or any of these points to move things around. And let me go ahead and just move that shoulder down a little bit. And actually that's about enough. That's all I want to do. Then you hit enter, and it does its thing. This is great for slimming, by the way. Use this for chins. I use it to give people waists who didn't have waists anymore. It's very handy. Yes, you can enhance things too. Let's not go there. And you can see just by doing that, we were able to just kind of push her arm down a little bit. Just kind of changes the angle of her body a little bit. All right, so now that I've got my kind of major reconstruction done, I didn't really need to do a lot, but I just wanted to show you that I use that tool, for the warp tool, for doing that. And I don't really need that layer as a separate layer anymore. So I'm going to Command or Control E to flatten, to merge those visible layers. Now the next step is I will go into my blemish retouching. And again, Bethany has incredible skin. She has very few blemishes, but again, let's go through the process. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the background layer. And to do that, I'm going to use Command or Control J. I knew somebody was going to go there. Deb mentioned, can I lift the bus line? Yes. I shot a wedding for a friend a couple years ago, and she had a wardrobe malfunction where things were no longer aligned. And that's exactly how I did that. Feel free to play on your own. I'm not going to go there today. So let's duplicate the background. Two ways to do it. I can just drag the background down the bottom left over to the little folded page thing, or I can hit Command or Control J. I'm working on a MacBook Pro right now. If I say Command and you're a PC user, just substitute the word Control. So again, I can just drag to the folded page, and that will make a copy of it as well. So you see we have a background copy. And let me show you my favorite way for doing blemish retouching. A couple of you asked, Arthur asked, how long is the webinar, by the way? I plan on going for an hour. That's the plan. I may go a couple minutes over, and as I mentioned, I've got a lot more demonstrations ready for you guys today than I can possibly do in an hour. So what I'm going to do is the afternoon session, I will do different demos. Okay, so first I want to check for blemishes, and again, we don't have many to deal with here, but let me just show you the process. I like to use, this is how I like to use to create blemish fixes. I don't use the stamp tool for this anymore. I use the lasso. So I'm just going to get the lasso, and yes, when I'm home I will use a Wacom tablet for this. And I'm just going to circle over the areas that I want to fix. Now I'm really splitting hairs here because she has such great skin. But let me just look. I'll even get rid of some freckles just because there's not much here to get rid of. And I will look on her body as well. And apparently when we were in studio, it was a little chilly because you can see a little bit of goosebumps, and we're going to get rid of those as well in just a minute. So I'm just circling all the pieces that I want to fix. And you might see it. Now, by the way, one of the things about Photoshop is there's always 20 different ways to accomplish the same thing. I'm showing you ways that have worked for me over the years. Some of them new, some of them old. And pick the ones and choose the ones that really work for you. Okay, so again, I was getting really nitpicky here, but I just selected a whole bunch of things. Now I will simply go to Edit, Fill, and Content Aware. Hit OK, and then in one fell swoop, all of my blemishes are edited at once. Let's see here. Oh, so someone asked, what key am I holding on when I do this? I'm holding on the Shift key with the lasso tool. That keeps it active. Because when you hold down the Shift key, that turns the lasso into to an addition. You'll see a little plus come beside it. So let me deselect these, and I'll just turn this layer on and off, and you can see one fell swoop. In fact, let me scroll down a bit, because we did remove some freckles here, and you can see just that quickly they're all gone. How cool is that? Now, someone also asked about what's the difference between merge and flatten. So if I have a couple of different layers chosen here, actually I'm just going to delete my previous layer here. Actually, when I get to a couple more layers, I'll show you that. I don't have anything really to merge or flatten right now. Well, actually, is there any reason for me to keep the blemishes? Actually, no. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, if you go to the flyout menu here, you have flatten image. If I choose flatten image, what it'll do is it'll give me one layer, and all these other layers that I have that are hidden right now will be deleted. If I click on merge, it's just going to merge the layers that are currently visible, which is just those two. So you can see here, and then you can see the shortcuts here. You've got merge down, which is what I'm going to do, and merge visible. So if I had say I had that layer on also, that would also apply. So I'm just going to hit Command E to merge, and now we're back down to our background layer with our blemishes fixed. All right, next thing I'm going to do, actually I shouldn't have merged that yet. Let me undo that, because I got one more thing to do on my blemish layer. Since I'm not going to want to actually save that, actually I am going to do that, sorry. Let me go ahead and merge that, and I'm going to Command J or Control J that again to create another copy, because now I'm going to use my favorite skin softening tool, and that is the surface blur. So I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, Surface Blur. Now you might notice some of the filters are grayed out. That's because we're working in a 16-bit image right now, and not all filters work in 16-bit. So let's go to Surface Blur. And I have a default set of settings that I typically use. And these are them. These are my default settings, 1424. Now, they will turn your subject into a real blurry, almost painting kind of thing. But that's okay, because we're working on a layer, and we're not going to use it at full strength. So I'm just going to hit OK. And you can see it's kind of blurred her, and it's going to make her almost like a painting. Elaine asks, once they're merged, can they be unmerged? Yes, until you save the image. If you notice up in the history panel here, you can see all the merges that have happened. So you can always go back and do that. The shortcut for flatten layers, by the way, Bill, is Command or Control E. Now, Mark asks, is this technique better than the spot healing brush? Is it better? I find it certainly a lot faster, but It's a personal preference kind of thing. I still use the spot healing brush sometimes, and I also will use the patch tool, which we're going to use a lot in just a minute. All right, now this the surface blur is taking a long time. You know what? We're working on a really, really big file here. So actually, I'm going to cancel this for a second. Let me just cancel. Let's bring the file size down. And yes, I would normally work in 16-bit, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it to 8-bit, which will cut the file size in half. So let's just get that out of the way. 16-bit gives you a lot more control if you're doing any kind of serious editing. But this image was very good out of camera, so we're not going to do any tonal edits that are going to cause us a lot of trouble. And then I'm going to go to image size. And you can see it's 51 megs, just the base file. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's make it, we'll make it a 9 by 14, and that'll cut it again by about 2/3. Just have a little bit smaller file to deal with. So we'll let that do its thing. All right, so Bill said, time for a new MacBook. And I don't think it's my MacBook's the problem. You know, when this file actually with all these layers that are currently in this file is actually over 1 gigabyte. So that's why when you do something very intensive like the surface blur, that can take a little while. So I'm just giving myself a little bit smaller file to play with here. Okay, so let's do that one more time. Filter, blur, surface blur. Now, Victor asks, what's the difference between surface blur and Gaussian blur? Surface blur seems to be better for skin tones. Gaussian blur really will blur the entire image even more. It seems to add a little bit of more of a directional blur to it. This is a real weak technical response. Surface blur seems to be more static. So it doesn't cause distortion or blur into other areas as much. That's the way it seems to me. Okay, so I've got my image blurred, and you saw that one nice and quickly. However, I don't actually want to blur the entire image, just some pieces. So I'm going to add a mask by clicking down here. Now, I want to mask out the entire image at first. So if you hold down Alt or Option and click on Mask, it automatically fills it with a black mask, which you can see down here in the lower right. Then I'm going to get a brush. Now, brush is obviously way too big, so I need a little smaller brush here. And what I'm going to do is, on a Mac, it's Control Option. Hold Control Option down, go left and right, it changes the size of the brush. If you go up and down, it shows the density effect. Let me hit 0 to give myself 100% opacity. So as I drag down, you can see you get a very hard edge. As I drag up, a soft edge. On a PC, it's Control right click. So I want to brush about that big, and I'm going to bring my opacity down. I don't want 100%. I'm going to do maybe 40%. And to get that, I can just type in the number 4 on my keyboard. You can see opacity changes to 40%. And now, since I have a black mask on my layer, I need white to paint with to paint through that. So I'll just hit X, the X key, to swap my black and white. And I'm going to zoom in a little more on her face. Bring my brush back up, and then I'm just going to start to paint over the skin with white. And actually I'm going to go a little higher. I'm going to go to 60% just so you can see it a little better. And you can see, look at how the skin is softening. Make my brush a little smaller. If you use brackets, by the way, once you use that keyboard shortcut, you'll never use brackets again. Guarantee it. Now, I mentioned about a little bit of goosebumps here. Oh, and by the way, if you want to use a brush in a straight line like I do right here at the base of her dress, if you just click once, right, I just clicked once right there, come up to the other end of that straight line, hold in the Shift key and click again, it draws that effect in a straight line. So I could use that same tool for there. For here, click, hold down Shift. I'll just drag along there. And I'm going to get myself a little bigger brush, and I'm just going to come over the area where we had some goosebumps to deal with. And again, I'm just using a mouse here. If I was in my studio, yes, I would be using my tablet. And you can see it also does a wonderful job at the intersection of the arm to the shoulder, which a lot of times is unflattering. It just creates a little bit of a blur there, which is an area we don't care about. Got a little more blur on her neck, a little bit smaller, and gorgeous. So look what we've just done by doing that. Look at the difference. Look at the skin before and after. Love that. So again, a couple of you just asked the shortcut. So if you're used to using the bracket keys for your brush size, you're never going to do that again. On a Mac, hold down Control and Option, click, drag right for bigger, left for smaller, up and down for hardness. If you're a PC person, it's Control and right click. I'm using a Mac, so I don't have that, but you'll never go back to the brackets again. But look at how gorgeous that skin softening is. That's why I've really come to like that. Okay. Am I going to want to, by any chance, possibly undo that? Probably not. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a hue saturation layer, because what I want to do is I really want to bring her eyes out, make her eyes very intense. In fact, I'm going to zoom in a little more, and I'm going to create a hue saturation adjustment layer. Now this is, for some reason right now, this is the way I favor this. I'm sure some of you guys have other ways of doing this, but watch what happens. All I'm looking at is the eyes. I don't care about the rest of the image. I'm going to increase the saturation by a crazy amount. It's going to make her skin look absolutely horrendous, but it's okay. I'm just looking at the eyes. Then I'll close that, and again, I've got a mask, and my mask here is by default white. So I'm going to hit the X key again to swap black and white. And with the mask chosen, when it's chosen, you get these little corners around it. I'm just going to hit Option or Alt Delete, and that will fill the mask with black, which in essence cancels it out. Now I'm going to get my brush again. I'm going to make it smaller. In fact, let's go ahead and zoom into this eye here. We're actually over, that's at 300%, so we're zoomed in pretty close. Get my brush. And I'm going to put white on my brush. Again, just hit X. And the opacity is set for 60%. Yeah, I'm going to go to 70%. Just hit 7. And I'm just going to paint with white in the eye. And you can see the eye starting to get its color back. So hold down the Shift key and drag over to the other eye. And there we go. Look at all that color coming back into the eye. So let's back off on that. And look what the eyes just did. And that was just by adding that hue saturation adjustment layer. Now you see I have a mask here. It looks completely black. If I hold down Alt or Option and click on the mask, it shows you what area you just did your adjustment to. Wonderful. Now, just in case I want to be able to go back to these layers for some reason, what I'm going to do is create something called a stack. And a stack is a flattened version of the layers that you're working on, but you get to keep all your layers underneath. And to do that, it's a little bit of a hidden command. If you come up to here, you see Merge Visible, and that would just get rid of all these layers and give us a single layer. If you hold down the Alt or Option key first, or at any time before you actually choose it, and then choose Merge Visible, the difference is you see this layer 5 just showed up, which is all of the layers underneath it flattened. And this is really handy. You're going to see this a couple of times when we start to do sharpening and things like that. Okay, next thing I want to do, in fact this next thing is going to be a perfect application of what we want to do. I want to add some more intensity to the eyes. I want to help the light along a little bit. So I'm going to create a blank layer just by clicking on the folded page here. And the first thing I'm going to do is fill it with gray. So I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, 50% gray, and click on OK. And we get this plain gray layer. What I'm going to then do is come over here to the blending modes, change it from normal to overlay. And it just disappeared. Now if I turn this on and off, basically what's going on is nothing's happening. And these blending modes are organized according to what they do. Dissolve I've never found a use for. All of these will darken the layer below. All of these will lighten. All of these change the contrast of the layer below. This is another weird grouping that we'll do. Actually, we'll use one of these next. And then these will affect the color of the layer below. So we want to have it on overlay, which is a contrast adjustment layer. So now the way this works is anywhere I paint with black will darken the layer below. Anywhere I paint with light will lighten it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten some of the catch lights and the highlights in the eyes. So let's zoom in on the eye again and get my brush, and about that size is good. And for opacity, I'm going to go relatively lower, 20 to 30%. Let's choose 30%. So I just hit 3 again, no more of this dragging sliders around. And you can see, you might be able to tell here that I use a softbox. I'm just going to brighten the edge of that up to create a little more of a catch light. And also when light enters the eye, where it enters on the exit side of the curve of the lens, there's another catch light that happens. You can see it here, but what I'm going to do is make this a little smaller, and I'm going to bring that out a little more. Just that much. While I'm here, I'm also going to darken the center of the eye. So I'm going to hit the black key, and I'm just going to paint in here with some black. So I'm going to do over the same exact thing on the other eye. Get my white. I'm going to add a little bit to the catch light on the one side, and there isn't one on the right-hand side, so I'm going to make one. Now that's just a little subtle adjustment, but let's back off and see what we just did. Ooh, let's put black. Let's put black in the middle. Just darken that up a little bit more. Okay. So again, if I change this layer back to normal, you'll get to see what it is that we just did there. So I darkened the middle. I added little catch lights on the right. And go back to overlay. Let's back off a little bit. And let me turn that on and off. So look what that just did to the catch lights in the eye. Really made a huge difference. So just those two, they use saturation and the catch lights. We've taken her eyes from there to there. Amazing difference already. All right, let's back off. And even from a distance, you can see the difference. Look at the difference in her eyes. Okay, so let me get rid of that spare layer. And I also want to change kind of the brightness of her dress here. I want to make it a little bit more intense. So a couple ways I can do that. And I could try to go to select it, but you know what? Just to be safe and make it easy, I'm going to create another. Actually, I can use the existing overlay layer that we've got for our eyes. And I'm just going to give myself a bigger brush. And with black and 30%, I'm just going to darken that up, and you can see that's exactly what's happening. And while I'm here, make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to click, hold down the Shift key, go to the other end of the strap, and click again. I was a little sloppy with that. Let me do that again. A little bit smaller brush. So click, Shift, and click. Same thing, click, Shift, and click. There we go. I got a little bit of an extra smudge there. So if you have something that you overdid, you can always get yourself a 50% brush, which, by the way, in Photoshop is 118, not 128 like it would be other places. 118 is considered 50% in Photoshop, so I can just paint with gray there, and it just undoes what I just did. Great. So I'm kind of happy with the image, but there's a lot more I want to do. I want to have a lot of fun with this. In fact, what I really want to do is I want to completely change the background. Oops, sorry, I double-clicked where I should have not. I'm just going to get rid of all these old layers that I was playing with. What I'm going to do is bring in a new background. So in order to do that and make it easy, first thing I want to do is select the background out. Well, how do you do that? Well, first I need to give myself a stack. So I want to stack everything that we've done. So again, I hold down Alt Option, Merge Visible. And okay, so I've got a stacked version, which is everything that we've just done now, and I'm going to try to select the background. So first thing I'm going to try, I know a lot of people are down on it, but a lot of times the magic wand works pretty well. This is a fairly even background, so I'm going to use a very low tolerance here. That's why I have 7 set up in here. I'm not going to click contiguous. Contiguous means, like, for example, let me, oops, undo that. Let me zoom in here. This spot on her hair, if I click on contiguous and choose out here, it won't pick up the little pieces in between, and I actually do want to catch those. So let's try the magic wand at a very low setting and click on that, and even despite that, even with that low number, I still got her hair. So what are my choices? Well, I got to bring the number down. Let's try 4 and better. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is get my lasso, and if I hold down Alt or Option, it turns the lasso into a minus. You can see the minus next to it. Or if I want to add, I hold down the Shift key and then add. So I can pick up that little corner that was missed. And what I want to do is zoom in on the hair here, get my lasso again, hold down Alt or Option, and I'm going to get rid of this stuff. Now, I happen to know my plans for this image. It's okay that I pick up a little bit of the edge of her hair because of what my plan for the image is. If you're planning on shooting an image for a composite, this is where doing things like having a green screen really come in handy. All right, let me get rid of that stuff. Because a green screen allows you to very easily and very quickly eliminate backgrounds. All right, so I'm just kind of doing this a little bit sloppily. Okay. All right, so I've actually got a pretty decent, I got a little bit of the hair in the foreground still picking up. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So before I go any further, I'm going to save this. I'm going to click on Save Selection and call it Background. Now I need to go get another image that I'm going to make my background. So I'm going to click Open. And in my textures file, what I did was I got some images from Space. Let's see, where did I put it? Oh, maybe I didn't leave it in there. Let me find my Hubble images. Now, by the way, all of these images are available to you guys wherever you'd like to use them. This is all public domain stuff. So it's in my images folder. That was handy. So I go to Space Hubble Images, and let's pick something interesting for a background. Let's use this one. So you can go on the Hubble Space site and download all of these. They are free. It's your tax dollars at work. All right, so I'm not sure exactly which part of this I'm going to use yet, so I'm going to select the entire thing. So I'm going to hit Command or Control A and copy. And I'm just going to close this because I'm done with it. Now I'm going to, remember that image is now on my clipboard. I'm going to go to Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into. And it's going to take that background image and put it behind her. How cool is that? Now, this image is much bigger than the file we're working on. In fact, if I hit Command T to edit this, you can see the bounding box goes way outside of my image. And it can be really a pain to try to find where the edge is. Very simply, with something like that selected, if you hit Command or Control 0, it will show you the bounding box. And I can then take this and move it wherever I want. Actually, let's do that. I kind of like that about there. And I can also resize if I want to bring in some more of the image. And if I decide, I kind of like these stars over here, but I want them on the other side. So I'm going to hit Return to put those there. And then what I'm going to do is, with the background, I'm going to flip the background. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. And now I have to move it around again. So I just get my V, hit V to move. Oh, let me fill this back to the screen. Hold on. So let's see a couple questions here. Richard asked, by the way, that do I ever encourage plugins? And the answer is yes, I do. In fact, on one of the demos I may not get to this morning, I am going to do that. Okay, so again, here's my layer. Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal, and there it did that. I hit the V key to move, to get to the Move tool, and I can see my bounding box. And I want, just like there, I kind of want those stars just off to the right of her head. Very cool. Okay, so there's my image with the new background, but there's a couple of other things I want to do. I want to have this image actually start to show up over part of Bethany here. So what I'm going to do, if I take a look at my mask, so there's the mask, and we can see all the fine strands of hair. What I'm going to do is, I want to blur the mask a little bit. In fact, I'm going to make the mask a little bit lighter in spots. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the mask, and that brings up the mask properties. First thing I'm going to do is click on Feather, which is going to soften the transition between the mask and the background. You'll see it starting to encroach on her. You can start to see it on the arm a little bit. All right, so there's my start. But with the mask selected, I'm going to start painting with white a little bit to start to have the mask start to actually show on her face. So I'm going to get my brush, get it a nice kind of a big brush, and yeah, 30% is probably a good start. That's what our opacity is right now. And with white on the mask layer, remember the mask layer is selected because we see the little corners here. I'm going to start painting on her hair, and you can see the stars behind starting to come through. And I'm lower the opacity to 20%. And I actually want them to come through her dress a little bit, because really the focus is her face. I'm going to leave her eyes and her nose and her mouth alone, but other spots are kind of fair game. And how much of you want this to show through is going to be your preference. Now again, if I don't like where it showed up, I can just put black in the foreground and just start to paint with black over top, and that will undo that. So pretty cool. All right, I like where we're going. And you can see, just so you can see where we started, here's our beginning image, and there's where we are up to now. Very different feel to it. All right, now cropping. I want to crop this image a little bit differently. I really want to focus on her. Now typically I crop to the image. I don't have myself stuck in 8x10, 4x6, whatever. This image I kind of saw, and I kind of saw it as a square image. Now when you in the new crop tool, you might notice, if you're a Lightroom user, then this is something you'd be used to. The crop tool is different now in that, whoops, undo that. As soon as you click it, it gives you a crop. Now let me turn this, the default is unconstrained, so let me put that there. And at that point you can change the size, and when you click on the image, the crop boundaries stay the same, and the image moves behind it. If this drives you batty, you have the option of turning it back into the old crop tool way of doing things. Underneath here, this little gear, you can choose use classic mode, and that turns it into the old crop tool. I do like the new one though. Now I did mention I kind of thought this as a square image, so I'm going to make it a square, and I'm going to move her around inside here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to actually put her eye right, her main eye right there, right on the rule of thirds grid. And yes, there's lots of different grid overlays you can look at. I still am kind of stuck on the rule of thirds, and that works for me. So when, oh, and also you have delete cropped pixels. If you turn this off while you're working in the image, you can get back and recrop, and the image, all the image extended beyond here will still be there. For our purposes, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Oh, also, say for example you're designing this to go out to print, and you want it to be, oh, let's say you bought a frame and it's a 10x10 frame, and you're going to send it out to a lab, so you want, 300 dots per inch. What you can do is go to size and resolution right here and put 10x10 at 300. And you can save, if you do this a lot, you can save it as a preset. Hit OK, and there's your new preset, 10x10 at 300 dots per inch, or pixels per inch. And what happens is, if the image needs to be resampled up or down, Photoshop 6 now automatically does that. So you don't have to resize. In fact, once I hit return on here to actually accept that crop, if there's any resizing that needs to be done either up or down to give me a 10x10 at 300 dpi, it's doing that in the background. And if we go ahead and take a look at the image size, you'll see it is now 10x10 at 300 dpi. All right, I like what we've got so far. Let's bring up one more new tool. And actually, before we go any further, I am going to create a stack for this. So again, Alter, Option, Merge Visible. That will give me a flattened version of where we are so far. Again, let me get rid of my extra layers here for memory's sake. All right, so here's our stacked version of the image. And I'm going to bring up one of the new tools. Now under the filters, this is new in Photoshop CS6, there are new blurs in this blur gallery: field blur, iris blur, and tilt shift. For portraits, I generally find myself using iris blur. Now let me show you field blur real quick. What field blur does is it starts off by giving you this little dot, and it just blurs a whole image. By itself, it's really not particularly useful. What you need to do is start adding more dots, more pins. So if I click on her eye, I can then drag this slider around the circle, or I can use the slider up in the upper right hand corner and tell it, all right, I don't want that blurred, and I don't want around that eye blurred. And you can continue to set these points where you do or do not want blurring to occur. The nice thing about having it this way is that you have the ultimate in control. It can be a little bit tedious because you've got to go around and do these individually. If you want to hide what you're doing, by the way, just hold down the H key and it will hide and you get to see. Now if you really want to see what's being blurred or not, hold down the M key and the M key will show you your mask. So you can see that the black areas are not blurred and the white areas are, and it does create a nice transition. So for example, it's not blurring enough down here, so I can put another one here, and I can make it real blurry if I want, or a little bit less. Same thing here, if I want to have the bottom of her dress here a little bit more blurry, again to bring more focus into her. So now I can hit M again, and you can see just the black area is what has been saved and the rest has been blurred. And that's kind of nice. And then I can just hit OK, and it will do that. Now that was the field blur where you just start to put in all the dots. Again, as I mentioned, the nice thing is you have the ultimate control. You really can control exactly where the blur points are. Steve asks, is there any radius control in that? In that case, actually no, and that's where the other blur comes from. And you can see this. Here's our before and after. Just did kind of a nice blur, but I'm going to undo that. I'm going to back off. I'm going to unblur that because I'm going to show you the other blur, which would probably be more common for a portrait, and that is iris blur. And iris blur does give you kind of a whole radius thing. So I'm going to come in here and tell it that's my center. Now what happens is everything, and again I can hold down the M key and you can see where it's black, it's protected, it's not blurred. These control points decide where the transition starts. So from the center to the control point is sharp. From the control point to the edge is where the blur takes place. And you can click on these points and change the shape of the circle. So if I want to just have it around her face be sharp, I can do that. And you can also move the individual points inside. So for example, if I click all of them, they move together. If I hold down Alt or Option, then I can move just one. So if I want to make sure that, for example, that left eye stays sharp, I can do that. I can also again control how much blur is happening outside of the circle that we've created. We'll do that much. Also, right up here, you notice this little square in here. What this allows me to do is change it from a circle to a rectangle. Don't know if I'd use that for portraits, but it's there. And again, I can hold down the M key. You get to see where that is. And I can hold down the H to hide it and decide if I like it or not. And I kind of do. Oh, while you're here, when you're doing this blur, you then have also something here called blur effects. And by default, it's hidden. Now, bokeh will, let me just show you. It's easier to show you than explain it. Look at the background blur. Look at all the stars off in the background. As I increase this, you'll see they will start to kind of bloom, kind of as if you had a really short depth of field. They will start to blur. You can also, if they have color in them, I can also drag the color slider, and you can see some of them are starting to turn red and orange. You can also tell it where the range of light you want these bokehs to be affected. I can actually take it away from the very bright objects and create kind of freaky results. I'm going to put it back to its default actually. Let's just back off on that just so it looks kind of normal. And I'm going to back off on the brightness a little bit. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit OK on that. I'm going to show you something else I've done with these that I really like. Oh, so yes, to show the mask, John asked, is it M or N? It's M as in Mary. Yes. Yeah, Richard said he never heard that. Middle gray in Photoshop, for some reason, is actually 118. I had been, for years, dividing 255 by 2 to get my middle gray, and I recently found out that the way it works, it's actually designed to be 118. Alright, so there's our blur. Now, I'm going to hide this for a second because I want another copy not blurred. So I'm going to come down to all my layers and hit merge visible again. Alright, so I'm going to put this over top of my blurred layer, and take a look here. There's the without the blur. I'm going to bring the opacity of this layer down, and what it'll end up doing is give me both the blur and the sharp. So I get the little hot points, the little stars inside the different stars, but I still get the blur that the bokeh gives you, which is kind of cool. And by having it this way, you get to control kind of the flavor of what you're after. I kind of like that. Alright, also while I'm here, I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to change, let me hit D to get my black and white in the foreground, and X to put black in the foreground. Now I know this is a 10 by 10. I want to give myself a little bit of a border, so I'm going to go to image canvas size and change it to a 12 by 12. So I'm just going to hit 12 and 12, make the extension black, and that's going to give me a little border around the image. Now the reason I did that is because I'm after doing something else. I'm going to double click on this layer, and that's going to bring up the layer style. Because what I want to do is put a little pinstripe around here with a little outer glow. So I'm going to click on stroke, and for color I'm going to pick a blue kind of out of the background and make it a little bit lighter. I'm going to put it inside, and I don't want it that big. Now we're not seeing it because this layer has had its opacity brought down. We're going to fix that in just a second. So I'm going to do about a 10 pixel, and I'm actually going to make it a little bit lighter again. And hit OK. Actually, let me change this layer back to 100% for a second so we can really see what's going on. So there's our stroke. I also want to put a little outer glow here. So I'm going to click on outer glow. I don't want yellow, I also want a blue for this. So I'll click a blue. In this case, I'll make it a little bit lighter. And let's spread it out a bit. Make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to change the blending mode from screen to hard light. It should make it a little bit. Nope, hard light made it disappear. Was it vivid light I was after? There. Nope, hard light is what I wanted. Okay, I'm kind of thinking science fiction mode here, so I wanted to kind of create kind of that glow. And let me change the color a little bit more to something even a little lighter. Yeah, something like that's kind of what I was after. So let me make the size a little smaller. Just want a little bit of a glow around that pinstripe. Okay, but now notice that we've lost our background blur. And that's where the difference between the opacity and the fill sliders come. Opacity will change the opacity of the entire layer so that it starts to disappear. Fill, on the other hand, will affect the image but not the effects underneath it. So as I bring this down, you can see I could actually have my stroke with the blur complete, or have it anywhere in between. So I'm going to check the fill about right there, and I think we're done with this image because holy cow, I've gone through a lot of time. Let's just take a look at this full screen, and we can see our image. And just so you can see it before and after, let me bring up my layers again, and let's turn everything off that we did up to this point. There's our before, there's our after. Very cool. Let's do something else. All right, let's do something completely different. A friend of mine, Tom Mack, good guy. I'm gonna do a couple same processes to him. Now Tom's got a lot of character in his face. He's got that awesome mustache of his. I'm just going to do a couple quick edits first. So again, the process will be, I'll select the background layer, make a copy of it. So I'm going to hit Command J or Control J. Let me get rid of some of these other extra layers here. This is from my previous edit. Okay, so I've got my background copy, and here's where I'm going to use the new patch tool with its content aware abilities. And I'm just going to do some of these adjustments. And again, the cool thing about this tool is you don't have to even match the color. It's going to, oh, now you can see there, depending on the adaptation you use, it's going to match the color a little better. So you might have noticed if I choose very strict, it's going to be an exact copy of the area I copied from. If I do loose, it's going to stick more to the pattern or the texture underneath. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I do find myself using very loose most of the time. And I don't want to get rid of all those wrinkles. That's part of the charm and the beauty. But I'm just going to get rid of a couple of things. Alright, that's really all I want to do for him. Now let me back off so we can see the entire image. I want to add a little more contrast to this image. So I'm going to bring up a curves adjustment layer. Now curves are scary for a lot of folks, because in the past you had to know, oh, where do I want to put a point? How do I drag this up and down to get it where I want? Well, you don't have to do that anymore. Now you can use the pointy finger thingy or the targeted adjustment tool, call it what you like. And then you can just, with this, decide where do you want lighter and darker. So if I want to open up this side of his face a little bit, I can just click on there, and as I drag up, it will make that adjustment. If I come over here, you can, oops, I got some extra points. Let me undo this and reset. Let's reset this. How did I end up in my properties? Let me just set some extra windows closed here. Okay, let's do that again. Let's start again. Curves adjustment layer. Alright, so I'm going to use the targeted curve adjustment. If I want to bring down the brightness of his face a little bit here, you can see as I move the eyedropper along, you see the little circle appearing on the line that's showing where in the curve it's going to be adjusted. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit just to darken that part of his face. And over here I'm going to lighten it up, and you can see it's got a circle down in the shadows. So I'm going to open that up a little bit. I'm also going to come down into the deep shadows and darken them a little. This is a real subtle kind of adjustment. But I didn't have to understand really how to place points on my curve. I can just use the finger point to tell me. And just so you can see, we just subtly darkened up his skin, changed the contrast a little bit. Alright, now, you've probably seen black and white images of folks that are what's the word? Have been around longer than us to actually accentuate all the features and all the character in their skin. So I'm going to show you something else that I would do. This is the opposite of what I would do for a woman, but for a guy I might pull this off. So I'm going to create a stack. Again, Alt Option, Merge Visible. And I'm going to run a filter that is in Photoshop called the High Pass filter. And it's under Filter, Other, High Pass. And I'm going to use kind of an extreme number. The default is 10 if you've never used it before. Most of the time I use this filter for softening. In this case I'm going to do it as a super sharpening thing. So it creates this kind of embossed look. And once again I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to overlay. And now you start to get almost an HDR look. It's kind of like using the clarity slider in Adobe Camera Raw or in Lightroom. See how I turn this on and off? See how it really brings out all those details? Alright, very cool. Now also, I notice his shirt seems to be somewhat desaturated and his skin's a little red. So just like we did before, let's do one of those color balance adjustments. So I'm going to go to color balance, and I don't think he needs red, but let's just go through the process. Add a lot of red, add a lot of cyan. Needs a little bit of cyan. Again, less than 10. I'm going to leave green magenta alone since these were studio lights. A lot of blue, a lot of yellow. Needs a little bit of yellow. And again, I'm only looking at the face. I'm not caring about anything else. Same thing with highlights. Add red, add cyan. I'll add a little bit of red. I want them a little warmer. Yellow, blue. Tougher call, we'll go a little bit of yellow. Add a little more warmth into his skin. And then shadows. Red, cyan. Yeah, it needs a little red in the shadows. And then yellow is rarely needed in the shadows, usually blue. So we'll add a bit of blue. So let's take a look and see what our color balance did for us. And yeah, it warmed up his skin a little bit. although it made his hair a little bit yellower, but I think I might be okay with that. Nope, let's go ahead. We've got our mask. I'm going to fill it with black. Black in the foreground. Option delete. I just hid that. Get myself a nice big brush and really ruffling. You can get away with it this fast. Put white in foreground. I'm going to work at 80%, and I'm just going to go over top of the skin. So now I just applied that color balance. As soon as it catches up, I just applied the color balance just to the skin. Now along with that, I thought his shirt lost a little saturation. So I'm going to go to Use Saturation. I'm going to add a bunch. I'm just looking at the shirt here, and I'm happy with that. Now, except his skin got all kinds of crazy. So what I'm going to do is take the mask I just used for his skin, hold down Alt or Option, drag it over top, replace the layer mask, yes. Except what I just did was I put the mask over the shirt rather than his skin. See, because here's our mask. What I want to do is the absolute inverse of that. So I hit Command or Control I, and that makes a negative of the mask. And now his shirt got the blue and his skin stayed alone. Stayed all by itself. Now, if I take a look at the mask, again, I can just click on it with Alt. I can see that the mask was not at 100%, and I really want to mask that saturation off his skin. So I can do all the same operations on a mask that I do on a regular image. I'm going to hit Command or Control L to bring up the levels, and I'm actually going to make the mask 100% over his skin just by dragging up the level slider. Hit OK, click back on my image, and now I've completely hidden that saturation change, and only his shirt is getting the saturation. Cool stuff. Alright, lastly, now I take a look at this image and I realized after all of these color adjustments, and let's see what we've done by the way. We started off there. We've added a lot of sharpness and we've added a lot of character. Now to me this image is just kind of crying out to be a black and white. Now this is the one point where I'm going to leave Photoshop because although black and white, let's go ahead and do a stack. We'll create, before we do that, we'll do a black and white adjustment layer. So Photoshop has a bunch of defaults, and they're not bad. They're pretty good. And if you're not sure if you want to try any of these, maybe I want to see what a green filter looks like, or well, I know infrared's going to look funky. And you get, oh boy, or yellow. Again, it's going to make the skin way too white. And sometimes you need something in between here. And instead of messing with the sliders, again, you have the targeted adjustment tool. If I want to bring down his face a little bit, I can just click on there and drag left and right, and I can make the skin lighter or darker. So I can do the same thing with the hair. I can do the same thing with the shirt. I can make it darker or lighter. However, if you're really seriously in the black and white, then there's a plugin you just have to have, and that's Nick Silver Effects. So I'm going to leave Photoshop just for a second because this image deserves it. So I'm going to create a stack. So I have a flattened version of this image that I can run through Silver Effects. So I'm going to go through Nick, Filter, Silver Effects. So Silver Effects is just the plugin you have to have if you're doing black and whites. It's really a real true black and white kind of film simulation, and it's really pretty easy to use. Alright, I've done an entire program on this. So even its default setting is pretty good, but you can see all these presets along the left that kind of give you a thumbnail idea of what you're after. Structure is kind of like that high pass filter. If I want to add even more, you can see the image starts to pop even more. And you can turn that on and off as well. The cool thing is if you've got control points. For example, what I want to do is I want to open up this eye right here in his glasses. I want to make it up a little bit brighter. So I'm going to click on there, and I'm going to shrink my circle, and I'm going to increase the brightness a little bit. And I'm going to increase the contrast, and I'm going to increase the structure on that one eye behind. Alright. Now, the thing I love about this when you're doing black and whites is the grain that it creates, and I'm going to give it a decent amount of grain. I'm going to kind of make this look like a little older photograph. And again, this is something you'll see when you go to 100%. Let me come in close to the eye. Give it a second to render the image, but you're going to get to see what the grain does when it finally catches up to us. And when it does catch up, you'll see all the pixels go clear here. Well, that's okay. There it comes. It's coming through here. And look at that beautiful grain it creates. Yes, Photoshop does have a grain filter in it, but it doesn't come anywhere close to the real true photographic grain that this software is capable of producing. So I'm going to do that grain. I'm also going to give a little bit of toning. Rather than have it a pure kind of cold black and white, I want to add a smidge of warmth to it. So I'm going to click on here. I love the coffee filter. And you can also adjust the amount. I'm going to drop it down a little bit to about 20%. And also, again, these sliders are overall. I'm going to increase the overall brightness of the image just a little bit. And then lastly, and again, there's a lot more to do about this software that I'm not going to go into today, is I'm going to add a border. So if you click on image borders here, I'm going to add one that's got a little bit of an edge to it. Let's choose that one. While you're here, by the way, you can change the size of the border. You can make it bigger or smaller, meaning closer to the edge. You can also adjust the spread, which is how far it comes into the image. And you can also make the edges rougher or cleaner. So I'm going to make them up a little rougher and hit OK. And I'm going to end up with really the image I wanted. Wow, it's 1:51. I'm probably going to go over a little bit because I want to show you one more image demo and then I got to finish things up. So let me just, the last one I do is going to be really fast, so you're definitely going to want to watch that on the recording. So let me just let this finish up here and we'll see our final image. And this is going to be really just a stunning black and white of a face with an enormous amount of character in it. And again, since this is such a big file, I didn't resize this one ahead of time, so we're dealing with the original file. But take a look at that. And let me zoom into 100% just so you can see. Look at that grain. How just amazing is that? So when I turn that on and off, you can see the before and the after. That image was just screaming for black and white, and love it. And open up an image that I took a couple weeks ago. I actually took this as a demonstration for what happens if you're shooting in the shade and you don't have any lights with you. So this is the image with no flash, and yes, I was able to recover it and actually make a pretty good image out of it, but it ended up taking kind of a bunch of edits for me to do to make that happen. So yeah, white balance was correct, the green's in the background, but she was so surrounded by trees. You can even see the green reflections here in the lamppost that it made her skin look green as well. So let's go through the process first. Also, to speed things up, I'm going to shrink this image down a little bit just to, because it's 50 megs right now with all these layers, it's going to end up being 800 megs or so. So let me just make it a little bit smaller image. Just resample that down a bit, just so that things go a little more quickly. So the process I typically do when I'm doing a portrait edit is the first thing I'll do is duplicate the background, and then I'll do my retouching. I'll look for any kind of blemishes or things that need to go. Alright, better. Alright, so a little smaller image. So this is our friend Bethany, and Bethany is blessed with incredible skin, but we're going to go do some retouches to her anyway, and just so you can know the process. Now, one thing about Photoshop is that there are 20 ways to do the same thing. I'm going to show you ways that have worked for me over the years that have been efficient and very quick, and I hope you can put some of them to use, so to add them to your toolkit and make things work faster for you. So as I mentioned, retouching first. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to duplicate the background. A couple of ways to do that. I can either select the background layer and then type Command or Control J. I happen to be on a Mac laptop right now, so anytime I say the word Command, for you PC people, just translate it into Control. The other way you could do it is you could actually click on the layer and drag it to the Create New Layer icon, which is this little folded page here, and that will actually do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to zoom in to her face and see if there's anything blemish-wise that I want to fix. And there's not a whole lot, but let's go ahead and do some anyway. So here's my favorite process for doing this. I like to use the lasso tool. Yeah, in the past I would have used the stamp tool or the healing brush or all that, but I found for this kind of blemishes this works really well. So I'm just going to drag around. That's not even a blemish, it's a freckle, but anyway. If I want to add to that, add to this selection, if you hold down the shift key, you can see the lasso gets a little plus next to it. So I'm going to drag around that. I'm just using my mouse. In the studio, I'd probably at home use my Wacom tablet. So I'm just looking for any little spot that maybe I want to get rid of. And not a lot to do on her face. Now let's just take a look down and look at her arms, if there's anything sticking out. Well, not really necessary, but what the heck. We don't have too much to edit on her. Oh, and she's got a bruise. So let's get rid of that. All right. So I've selected the areas I want to retouch, and real simply, I just go to Edit, Fill, and Content Aware, and hit OK. And Photoshop does its magic and will fix all of the blemishes in one fell swoop. I find it a lot quicker than going through and using the healing brush or the stamp tool. And we can take a look right that quickly. I can just turn them on and off, and they're all gone. That's very, very nice way to do it. All right, so I've got my retouch done. In fact, let me take my old retouch layer and get rid of it. And as I mentioned, there's a problem with color here. This is an image taken without a flash. One I took right after this, I used a flash, which added a warmer color to her skin. The problem is, again, she's under a canopy of trees, so it made her skin look kind of green, even though the color of the trees in the background is correct. Now, I know her skin is a little green. However, the kind of color balance fix that you need for something like this may not be exactly obvious. So what I'm going to do is a trick that I figured out years ago that works for me. If you know the color's off on something, but you're not sure exactly how to fix it. So here's what I'll do. Go to the adjustment layers and click a color balance adjustment layer. And I'll bring this right up front here. Now, this is going to affect the entire image right now, and I'm not concerned about that. Really what I'm looking at is her face. In fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more because I want to get her skin color much better. And here's the process I use. It's kind of unscientific, but it really works well. Starting with midtones, which is where you left off. I'm going to add a lot of red to it, and I'm going to add a lot of cyan to it. Now, they're both going to look awful, but one's going to look less awful. And in this case, the red looks less awful. So then I will back that off to generally 10 or less. Just sometimes a little more. Okay, I'm going to add a little more to that. All right, magenta green is very rarely off. However, in this case, since she was surrounded in a green canopy, maybe she does need a little magenta. Let's take a look. So we'll add a bunch of magenta, a bunch of green. Obviously, green wasn't needed. We'll add just a little bit of magenta. And again, normally I would ignore this slider, but since she was under a green canopy, I will add it. Same thing, blue, lots of yellow. And again, I'm looking at her skin only. So she needs some blue because the yellow makes her look a little jaundiced. All right, so then I will repeat the process for the highlights and then the shadows. So let's add to the highlights, lots of red, lots of cyan. In this case, she needs a little cyan in her highlights. Magenta green I'm going to leave alone for the highlights. Lots of blue, lots of yellow. Lots of blue, lots of yellow. What do you guys think? I think it needs a little bit of blue just to take a little yellow out. And then lastly, shadows. Lots of red, lots of cyan. Okay, we need a little red in the shadows. And then yellow and blue. And we need some blue in the shadows. Okay. So let's take a look and see what we got here. Let's turn this on and off and we can see where we were and where we are. And it's a subtle change, but you can see there's been some warmth added into the image and her skin looks less green. Let's back off, turn it on and off. Now, it made her skin look good, but it made the green look kind of sickly. The green was fine. So what we want to do is mask off the green so that this color balance change we did doesn't affect the green. So you can notice when you create an adjustment layer, we automatically get a blank mask to play with. So with black in the foreground, I'm going to choose a brush. Now, brush sizing. I'm sure many of you guys use the left and right brackets to change the size, and I can do that. I can hit left and right bracket and do that. However, you're probably never going to do that again after you see this. For a Mac user, hold down Control and Option. For a PC user, Control right click. Hold them both down, click on your mouse and drag. If you drag left and right, you get a big brush or a small brush. If you drag up and down, it changes the edge hardness. Very cool, very fast way of changing your brush size. You will never use brackets again. So I'm going to zoom out a bit so I can get to my edges a little more readily. And since I don't want this color balance change that we just made to affect the background, give myself a nice big brush, and in that background area, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to mask it out. Whoops. Also, I'm going to, as I do this, hold on a second. For my opacity, I'm going to go pretty high. Now, I could go with the opacity and drag the sliders left and right to get the number I want. Or, if I know I want 80%, I can just type in the number 8. And you'd see the opacity changes to 80. If I want 40%, type in 4. If I want 100%, 0. If I want 10%, 1. So I'm going to go with 80%. And I'll just start painting over top of the green, and you can see the green background is getting its nice green color back. It's also making her skin actually look a little warmer because now the green is more in contrast to that. Now, when we did this, again, Control Option or Control right click, it made the back of her hair also warm from that color balance shift. And in reality, there would be a little bit more green reflected on here because of the surrounding areas. So what I'm going to do is bring my opacity down a bit. I'm going to go to 50%. And I'm just going to paint a little bit along the edge of her hair, just to let a little bit of that green come back in, since it kind of does reflect the background. So again, that quickly from there to there. So we're already on our way. Now, Robert asked a good question. Robert asked, wouldn't a color checker passport be a lot easier than going through all those sliders? Yes and no. Yes, it would get you a lot closer, but again, what's going on is I want to affect her skin and not the background. So if I use a color checker passport in this situation, it's going to affect the entire image. So am I more concerned about her skin or the background? Yes, I'm more concerned about her skin. And by the way, in this shoot, I did use a color checker passport. This was an example of if you didn't have any gear, can you repair an image that you didn't have all the right stuff? If I had used a flash, which I did right after this, and I had a color checker passport, then all of this goes away. So this is kind of a little bit repair. This is an example of actually not getting it completely right in camera. But good question. All right, so let me get rid of a couple of extra layers here, just to continue the process. So I'm not sure if I'm going to need this mask again, so I want to keep this layer. So what I'm going to do is create a stack. And what a stack is the flattened version of the image without actually flattening the rest of the image. And to do that, you hold down Alt or Option, go to the flyout menu here, and choose Merge Visible. Now, if I don't hold down the Alt Option key, notice those three just disappeared into the background. I don't want that. I want to keep these. So if I hold down Alt or Option and go to Merge Visible, you can see it adds layer 1, which is everything we've done up to here flattened into one layer. The reason I do this is I might want this mask later for something else, so I get to retain it. So now I'm going to go take a look at her eyes. Now, since this, again, I did not use a flash in this particular image, I'm going to have to go in and work on her eyes a bit. So let's back off a little bit. And here's the process that I like to do right now. First thing I'm going to do is do a hue and saturation adjustment. So I just choose Hue Saturation, and I'm going to add a lot of saturation. Don't worry about the rest of the image getting funky. Alright, so yes, the rest of the image is horrible, so I want to block out that adjustment. So you see I've got my mask active because I got the little corners on it, and I'm with black in the foreground. If you hit Alt or Option Delete, that fills with the foreground color, so that's all gone. So what I want to do is I want to let the color for the eyes start to come back through. So I get my brush again, Control Option to make it smaller, make it a little smaller than the eye there. In fact, I'll zoom in a lot so I can see what I'm doing better here. So we're way above 100%, so it's getting a little noisy here. Get my brush, and Now I want white in the foreground. So I hit X to put white in the foreground. And I'm going to paint fairly heavy, 70 or 80%. And I'll just start putting, I got a little bit of eye. That's okay. We'll get rid of that in a second. I'm just going to switch back to black and get rid of that area I just colored I did not want. Then I'm going to drag over, hold down the shift key, put white in the foreground, and get the far eye. Yeah, I got a little skin. So X again, just to clean that up. Very good. Alright, so now we can see that the eyes have a lot more intensity now I turn this on and off. And if you feel it's too much, the beauty of this is it's on its own layer. If I want, I can just bring the opacity. But I'm going to kind of go for a little bit supernatural on the eyes. So we're going to do that. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is brighten them up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is create another layer. And I'm going to fill it with gray. So I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, 50% gray, hit OK. Now we get this gray layer, but I'm going to change the blending mode, which is this thing right up here, from normal to overlay. This entire group right here affects the contrast of the layer below it. So if I'm in overlay, if I paint with black on that layer, everything below it will get darker. If I paint with white, it'll get lighter. And notice 50% gray, which was what I just filled this layer in with, in overlay, it becomes invisible. So anything darker than 50% will darken, anything lighter will lighten. And what I want to do is do a couple of things. I'm going to come in real close. Now I've got a little bit of a catch light. There must have been a little sun coming through somewhere in a tree, but it's not enough. So I'm going to get my brush again, and I'm going to make it really tiny. And at about 30% or so, let's try that. I just type in 3, see I got 30. I'm going to paint with white on this overlay layer over this catch light, and you can see it's brightening it up. Now when light enters the eye from a direction, since the lens is curved, it typically comes out the other side and lightens that side up as well. So just opposite where my catch light is, I'm going to come over here and add a little bit of brightness, just subtly. It looks kind of weird at this magnification, but you'll see when we zoom out it looks very good. Now same thing on the other side. I'm going to brighten up the catch light area and just go opposite that and add a little bit of brightness there. While I'm in here, to add contrast, I'm going to go to black and I'm going to darken her pupil a bit just to add a little more contrast because there's some reflections going on in there. It's okay, I can keep them a bit. Now I'm going to go to 100%, which I can hit just Command 1 and take a look at her eyes. So let's see what we've done. We went from there to there. So the eyes are really popping. And again, the use saturation thing is your call. If I want to bring down the saturation a little bit, make it look a little more natural, that's fine. I can also double click it at any point, and if I want to change the color of her eyes, I can give her any color you want. I can give her purple eyes if I want, just by dragging the use slider around a bit. But I will undo that and leave it the way it was. Now also while I'm in here, I'm going to brighten up her eyes a little bit more. So I'm going to put white in the foreground again. Let's zoom in again. And this one you have to be careful with, and you might even want to do it on its own layer. I'm going to get my brush, and I'm going to work at 10% tops, maybe even 5%. So let's see. Now I'm just going to lighten up her eye a little bit, just that much. I'll do the same thing over here, because if you do this too much, it's going to look kind of freaky. Just a little 10%, and now we can see the eyes have gotten some pop. Now while I'm in here, since we have a little bit of red, there's a couple different ways you can deal with it. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stack this so I can go ahead and adjust the eyes separately from the other adjustments I've done. So again, Alt Option, Merge Visible, and I get a nice stack. So the red vein, yes, somebody asked about the red veins. So there's a couple ways you could adjust this, and it's personal preference. One you can do that I really like is the new patch tool. And what the new patch tool does is it has the option of where it used to be normal, now it has content aware. There's also different adaptations, and the cool thing is you can change them after you make the selection and let it see which one works best. Strangely enough, the default is medium. Medium to loose, to very loose, generally worked better than very strict. So let's go ahead, and all you do for the patch tool is just draw around the area that's bugging you, and you drag it off to an area that's clean, and then let go. And you can deselect that. Actually, let me deselect it. I'll just hide it. And while I'm here, I can change to very loose to loose. And in this case, there was no detail, so it really didn't matter. But that kind of gets rid of that. So I can do the same thing over in this area. So let's say I decide this is a little too red. I can just bring it over to the white area. And notice it's a subtle. It doesn't completely get rid of it. It makes a subtle adjustment. I can look over here. Nothing on the other eye that really needs anything. The other thing I could do is create a use saturation layer for this. Bring the saturation down a lot. Maybe something like that. If you get, yeah, just something like that. And again, I've got a mask, so I'm going to fill it with black. Again, Alt or Option Delete with black in the foreground. And then get my brush again. Now, since it's a black mask, I need to paint with white. Put white in the foreground. I'm going to work at about 30%. And I can just paint over top of this, which just takes out a little bit of the color. Now, if you completely get rid of it, again, it's going to look really weird. But I can just take out a little bit of that red. So let's look at it 100% now. And we can see just a subtle, both a brightening. Oops, that was too much. A brightening and get a little of the red out of the eyes. Alright, so let me get, if you really wanted really crazy eyes, that's a previous layer I had done it. It's ending up doing it duplicated, so it's doubling the effect. So let me get rid of these extra layers here. Alright, so one more thing to do to this image. Now I want to create the focus on Bethany. I don't want the focus on the background. And I want to add a little more light into her eyes to kind of illuminate that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stack this. So I'll go to my top layer, hold again, Alt Option Delete, or Alt Merge Visible rather. I have another stack here, and I'm going to create a blank layer. Just like when we did for our eyes, I'm going to create a blank layer, fill it with gray. So I'm going to edit 50% gray and change it to overlay. Now this kind of light painting. Okay, so Marcy asked, can I explain the 50% gray layer again? When you change a blending mode, these blending modes, by the way, are organized by what they do. This group will darken the layer below it. This will lighten the layer below it. This group is contrast adjustments, and they're different contrast curves and how they affect. 50% gray on any of these layers is transparent to the layer below it. And if I add anything darker than 50% gray, it will darken the layer below. If I paint with white on it, it will lighten below. This one I used a difference adjustment layer earlier. You'll see that in the recording. I'm not going to do that again today. And then lastly, this will affect the color. So 50% gray layer with the blending mode changed to overlay becomes transparent. Now again, I want to put the focus on our subject, so I'm going to darken the background. So I'm going to put black in the foreground, get myself a nice big brush, and you can see how these slide. Using this keyboard command is so much easier. And I'm going to work, let's try 30%, and I'm going to paint with black on this layer off in the distance because I want to change the focus again to the subject. In fact, I'm even a dark. You got to be careful when you if you start to darken skin though, because it starts to get kind of like radioactive burn. Let me do that last one. Just going to get a little smaller and just darken her hair. Now you might have noticed that when you do a burn, if something is very light, it doesn't burn evenly. I can make the area around this bright area dark, but I can't really get it where I want. So I'll show you another technique for that. So again, let me just drop down to 20%, just burn this a little bit. Now I mentioned I wanted to put a little light on her face, so I'm going to give myself a little smaller brush, and kind of thinking 1920s, 1930s glamour photography, I'm going to put a 10% white swath across her eyes. That was really subtle, but you're going to see a big effect when we turn that on and off. The other thing I'll sometimes do at about 20% is actually paint along the hair a little bit on the highlights. Just kind of ends up bringing them out a little bit more. And this little thing can be a pretty dramatic effect. Actually, I just made her hair look gray over on that side, so let's fix that. And conversely, I could put some darker spots in as well, just to add a little bit more contrast to her hair. Now, just what we did so far, by the way, just so you can see, let's change this back to normal. And you can see that's what we just did to this image. And if I want these transitions from light to dark to be a little smoother, I can blur this layer a little bit. So let me go to Gaussian blur. I'll add not 41, that's too much, just a little bit to make the edges a little bit softer. Now, I can't give you a number here because it's going to be resolution dependent. Let's try something about like that. Change this back to overlay. Now watch what happens when I turn this layer on and off, just so you can see what we did. It's going to be a dramatic change. Look at that. If we went from there to there that quickly, it adds so much pop, and you're now focused on her face. Now the last thing I'll do, two more things I'll do for this. One is I mentioned this area back here is a problem. I've got this bright swath of green here, and the burn dodge that I did using this overlay layer is not working. So in order to do that, I have to go to a levels adjustment. So I click a new layer, levels, and now you're probably familiar with these sliders. This one will make it the darks darker, this will make the whites whiter, and this will adjust your midpoint. Well, that's all fine, but these top sliders increase contrast. We don't want to do that. We want to decrease this up here, and that's where the output sliders come in, which is this area down here. Now what these do is if I take the black slider and move it up, what it's doing is it's saying I want black that used to be zeros, in this case now to be 83. No, I don't want that. What I want to do, and again, I'm not concerned about the rest of the image, I'm just looking at this area right here. I want to bring the top output slider, the whites, down. So I'm now setting the brightest white to be where it used to be 255, now it's 160 or so. And I'm going to close that. And now I'm going to fill this mask with 100% black to completely hide it. So I put black in the foreground, Option Delete, and you see now I have a black mask. So I just undid what I just did, but with my brush, and kind of a nice big one, I got a black mask, so I use white, and at about 20%, I'm going to start, let's go 40%. I'm going to start painting over top of that area, and you can see what it's doing is bringing down those highlights so that they're less interfering with our model. So it really takes away without destroying the rest of the image. So you can see here, I could turn that on and off. It just brought down the dark spots. And then lastly, last thing I'll do is sharpen. So here's how I like to sharpen. Again, I'm going to do a stack because I don't want to sharpen the entire image. So I created a stack, and I'm going to use my favorite filter for sharpening is Smart Sharpen. And I'm going to zoom into her eyes and take a look and see what we got here. And notice the number that this is the highest I will generally use, about 180% with a radius less than 1. This really brings out things like eyebrows and eyelashes. It does create a little bit of grain, but it doesn't translate too much into a print. And this is to your own flavoring. You can always bring the number down, or remember it's on its own layer, so you can just change the opacity of the layer. I'm going to go with this. This is about the highest I'll go. Hit OK. And what it's doing is it's applying that amount of sharpening to the entire image. Once again, what do I want sharp? Well, I want her hair sharp. I want her face sharp. I don't necessarily want the front of her shoulder sharpened. So let's go ahead and create a mask for that. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option when I click on Add a Mask. If you click on Add a Mask, it just gives you a white mask. If you hold down Alt or Option when you click Add a Mask, it automatically fills it in with black. So I just hid that. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, and I'm going to get my brush again. I've got white in the foreground, and I'm going to go about 80%. And now I'm going to just paint over her face and her hair that's more close to her face. And really that's about it. That's the only parts I want sharpened. I don't care about the post. I'm more interested in her. And actually, let me zoom in. And this is going to be subtle, but as I turn it on and off, again, I'm not sure how well you see it. Let me go to 100%. As I turn this layer on and off, you can see the sharpening being applied. Now again, this was all a bit of an image rescue because this was an image that was not exactly shot the way I wanted. And now a good question, somebody asked, Jim asked, what's the advantage of using a stack? Well, by doing that stack, I was able to apply sharpening to the entire image and then mask it out. So here's my mask, so you can see what I just did. That's what I allowed to actually show through. So by having a stacked version of the image here, I was able to do a sharpen on the entire file and then only allow it to show through where I wanted it to show through. And I find myself doing a lot with certain kinds of color adjustments. I did the same thing when we did our color balance. I had a copy to go back to, so the color balance to fix her skin only showed up on her skin. All right. Somebody asked, would I straighten the lamppost? I don't know. Good question. Actually, I would probably crop this image and maybe not have the lamppost completely in there. Actually, good. You bring up a good point. Let's do a crop. Let's see what I really want. I want to focus on her even a little more. So when you do cropping now, cropping is new in CS6. It's completely different. Let's go to the default, which is unconstrained. And you can then drag it out. Now, if you're a Lightroom user, this will be familiar to you because cropping now works like it does in Lightroom. When you set your crop and then you drag the image around inside the crop. If this drives you batty, you can change it back to what's called classic mode, and then the crop thing moves and the image stays where it is. I think you'll find if you give it a chance that you'll like the new way better. Now I've decided, let's see, I want to make an 8x10. I don't typically do that. I let the image decide the aspect ratio, what I feel is the best relationship of the image in there. But if you're stuck and you really need to fit it to a certain size, that's fine. Now here's an 8x10 horizontal. Well, I want this to be an 8x10 vertical. Really simple. Just type the X key and it changes your orientation. So now I can drag her around in here and I can decide, does this angled post bother me or not? Well, I can just straighten it right in here and decide if I like it and bring my crop in so I have enough image. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I care that the post is straight or not. I don't think I really do, but just to make everybody happy, we'll go ahead and do a nice straight post. Now we're in a rule of thirds grid, so I'm going to put one of her eyes on there. And once I hit return, I then have an 8x10. All right. So we'll let that crop go. And yeah, I personally don't care if the post ended up being straight in this or not. So let's move on. I've spent a lot of time on an image. Actually, you know what? Let's do Steve here. And what I'm going to do for Steve is, I actually shot 2 poses of him. Really loved his face in one. And then when it got a better pose, he kind of went bland with his face there. So what I need to do is open up another shot of Steve here with a face I didn't like as much, but I liked I liked the face better, but I didn't like the pose as well. So he's nice and happy there, so let me go ahead and open that image. And by the way, do as much of your color correction, your sharpening, your lens corrections, do all that in Adobe Camera Raw. I didn't go over that because we're out of time. It's just too much to show you. I could go over this for days, guys. And again, and Deb, thank you. I forgot Doug, I forgot the basic Photoshop color setup. Do that in a second. Okay, so you can see I've got 2 images here. One where I like the face, one where I like the pose. So what I want is, I want the face from this image in the other image. So I'm just going to hit the L. So I'm sorry I'm doing this backwards. I'm going to show you the color settings in a second. I'm going to take his entire head, and I'm going to hit copy, and close this. So I'm not going to save that, and I'm going to hit paste, which is going to give us a disembodied Steve head floating around. So I'm going to hit V to my move tool, and I'm going to kind of get it in place. And actually, even right there, they match up pretty well because they didn't move a whole heck of a lot. But this is the one time that I used the difference blending mode to check my alignment. So I'm going to go, I went up to blending modes, go to difference, and I'm going to zoom in on this. And I kind of just want to make sure I get his eyes kind of in the same spot. And actually I want the shirt to line up as well. So be a little bit of movement in the head, but that's pretty close. You can see the catch lights in his eyes almost matching up. Then I'll put that back to normal. Alright, so we've got this little bit extra of the flute here, and the background doesn't exactly line up. So what I'm going to do is create a mask, get my brush again, and on the mask, I'm going to paint black where I don't want the underneath stuff to show through. In this case, I'm going to go at about 90%. So you see my opacity is at 90. And I'm just going to paint on the interface between the old and the new. Get rid of that. And the same thing where the shirt kind of doesn't line up exactly. Actually, what I really could have done when I did this is actually just take the middle of his face off the other image. I'm going to actually do that. I'm actually, yep, I got a little too much. And I made his ear a little bit too out of position, so I'm going to do the same thing with the top of the hat. And put his ear back where it belongs. And there we go. Steve with a new face. Oh, and I can turn off the layer, the bottom layer, and I can see the pieces I need to get rid of. So just get rid of that. Put my bottom layer back on. And there we go. New face. From frowning to happy. We like Steve happy. He's a happy guy anyway. Alright, so real quickly. I've got my new face. So I'm going to stack that. So again, Alt Merge Visible gives me a stacked version of that. And what I want to do is first I'm going to increase the saturation of the background. So I'm going to create a Use Saturation Adjustment layer. I'm going to bring the saturation up a lot. Again, it makes him look way too orangey. I just want to make the background kind of intense. And I'm going to create a mask on that. That gives us a mask. So I'm going to give myself a brush. And kind of at about 60%, I'm going to paint with black over his skin to get rid of that overly orange. Now it doesn't really show up on his shirt because it's a black shirt. Actually it doesn't even show up on the jeans. So let's go in close on the other hand. Brush again. Bring that down. And I'm just going to clean up the extra orange on his hand and fingers. Hey guys, since I'm riding solo today, I'm not answering as many of your questions probably as I should. So if you got something driving you nuts, I'll give you an email address when we're done so that you can send me a question if there's something I really missed that was important. Alright, get the rest of the hand here. It's actually looking pretty good. Give myself a bigger brush. Okay. Yeah, so we can see much more intense background. Okay, I like that. One other thing I'm going to do now, I had created a mask earlier. In fact, let me show you. Let me bring this back up over top. I had created a mask earlier where I was more careful about what we just did, and you can see it right there. And that is important because there's something else I want to add. I'm going to do an overlay here again. So I'm going to open up another image. And in my textures folder here, what I did was I got, since Steve's a phenomenal, he's actually a jazz flutist, but this is a little Mozart here. I'm going to do a select all and copy, close that, and I'm going to paste it right on top of here. And we have this little bit of image. So I'm going to hit Command T to transform. I'm going to make it real big. Since this is going to be used as a background texture, I really have a lot of leeway here. So again, Command 0 to show the entire transformation. Yeah, that's good. And now this looks blurry, but once I hit return, it's going to render it back in. Now, that doesn't really help us, does it? But in fact, also I want to rotate this a little bit, add a little bit of jauntiness to it, and kind of in there. And I want the white to disappear. I just want the black to remain. So if I double click on this layer, there's a blend if slider. I know these are kind of obscure for a lot of folks. The way blend if works is this layer, see it says this layer here. If I start bringing this down, anything that's white is going to disappear. So watch what happens as I drag that down. Anything that's white or even the border around it is going to change. So let's zoom in back here. And then I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to overlay. Because remember our overlay, what that did? And it takes anything that's below it, if it's black on it, and it makes it darker. So pretty cool. Except we have notes all over top of Steve. That's not good. But while I'm here, I can kind of move this where I want. And now remember, I had created a mask layer earlier of Steve, and I don't want the notes to actually show over top of him. So what I can do is simply hold down Alt or Option, drag that layer mask to the notes layer, and voila, it's gone. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and get my crop tool again. Again, I was thinking square for this one. Here's our 10 by 10 by 300 dots per inch. Let's stick with that for now. Actually, let's make it an 8 by 10. We'll create a new one. Let's go. Let's say I'm going to print this on my own desktop printer, and my settings are typically 8 by 10. And on my inkjet, I typically use 240 as my default. And I'll make that as a preset. And there's my crop. And I'll just position Steve accordingly, kind of how I want him in the image. Hit return, and I have an 8 by 10 at 240 ready for my printer. Very cool stuff. All right, so basically, again, for those of you guys that have to leave, just give me a couple more minutes, a couple more things I want to show you. If you want to join me this afternoon, go onto the X-Rite website, xritephoto.com, under Learning, and you can register this afternoon. Both of these webinars will be on the site if you can't join me. In fact, what I'm going to do is create one master webinar where all the demonstrations are done as one. So there we go. And you can see Steve before and after. A much happier guy, and the background looks really cool. All right, before we leave here, just a couple of things about Photoshop color settings. Under Edit, and you can do this before you actually start anything, go to Color Settings. And there's a couple questions you need to ask yourself. First of all, what do you want your default working space to be? I'm not going to get into the differences between ProPhoto and sRGB and Adobe RGB. Me personally, I work in Adobe RGB because that's what my monitor is. If you want to stay in ProPhoto, that's fine. If you're strictly a person that sends all your stuff out to a lab, then go ahead and set it to sRGB. I'm going to stick with Adobe. And also, color management policies. Really the important part is to preserve your embedded color space until you're finally ready to send it out. So if you're working in Lightroom and you're sending stuff from Lightroom into Photoshop, then by all means, just leave it in an embedded profile, because when you bring something in from Lightroom, it's going to bring it in at ProPhoto. That's really the trick. Stay with your preserved embedded profiles until you're ready to output. So I'm going to leave that there. Now, I want to see what this image is going to look like when I send it out to my printer. So I go to View, Proof Setup, Custom. And I'm going to choose the profile for my printer. Now I have profiles I've created with my Color Monkey photo, and I always name them with CM in the front so they all show up. So if I'm going to go out to, say for example, Ilford Pearl, which is a really nice paper, I click on there, and I can hit preview on and off and see if I see a change. And I'm seeing it very slightly. I'm not sure how well you guys see it. Let's see the difference between perceptual and relative colorimetric. Is there a difference? Yeah, there is. Notice perceptual, the background's a little bit darker. Relative colorimetric, it's a little bit lighter. Now this is somewhat subjective at this point. Which one do you like? By the way, the Simulate Paper Color and Black Ink, don't bother with it. And black point compensation, do leave it on. If this is something that's really driving you nuts, take a look at one of the previously recorded webinars called Beyond Monitor Calibration. I go through this in exhaustive detail. So I like the way perceptual looks. because I like the way it maintained that background blackness a little bit better. And when I go out to print now, if you look at view, we're looking at the proof colors. This is what this image is going to look like on my printer. So let me I just hit Command or Control P to go to my printer. Let me set it back to vertical. And if you look at color management, Photoshop manages colors, not the printer. And I have to tell it again, I'm using Ilford Pearl on my Epson 2880. I do want normal proofing. I had decided I liked perceptual. Yes, I want block point compensation. And the beautiful thing is, this is what comes out on my printer. Now, if I want to send this out to a lab, what I need to do is send my lab sRGB JPEGs because that's what they want. So in that case, I need to do my view proof setup to not my paper, but to sRGB. And I'm going to look at perceptual versus relative. If you don't see any change, then strangely enough, guess what? You know what that means? That means there's no colors in this image that are actually out of the sRGB space. If there were, it would show up. So there aren't in this particular image. So it doesn't matter if I choose perceptual or relative colorimetric because it's exactly the same. Hit OK. Then I need to go to Edit, Convert to Profile, and I need to convert this from Adobe RGB to sRGB. The intent doesn't matter because, as we saw in the proof setup, there were no colors outside of the sRGB space. So I hit OK. Save this as an sRGB file, as in a JPEG. And I typically, let's see if I have one on my desktop, I typically have something called For the Lab. Yep. So there's my Steve shot for the lab. You can see down here the sRGB profile is embedded. And I would just click on Save. And I now have, and I'll give it the best quality. And I now have an sRGB JPEG ready to go out to my lab, and it will come back from my lab looking just like this. And I'll show you one last image. Doesn't usually look this mean. She's actually a very sweet girl. In fact, just to show you, I'll show you what it normally looks like. But I asked her to give me a real intense look because I had plans on putting her in a new background. So again, first thing, retouch, I did exactly the same way. I'm going to jump through this kind of quickly. I used the lasso tool and content aware fill to do my little retouches. You can see I just got rid of some freckles there. Now what I wanted to do is bring in a new background. And this was again an example where I could use the magic wand to select this background. And I've got 7. And I'm going to turn off contiguous because I don't think it'll pick up too much of her skin. And I click back there. Oh, I don't have to turn off contiguous, sorry. Alright, so I did pick up some of the middle of her, that's okay. So now I'm going to use my lasso tool. Hit L, hold down the shift key to add. I want to grab those corners. I just draw circles around those because the corners are falling off vignetting a bit. And I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key to deselect the area on the inside. And again, very simply, just like that. And I've got a beautiful background and it's picked up really strands of hair. So I will save this as a selection and call it background 2 because I think I already have one. Alright, now I'm going to go get my background. So I'm going to click on Open. And I think I put it in my textures folder here. Yes, let's see. Here we go. Alright, so here's my background. I found this interesting spot underneath a bridge in Seneca Falls, New York. So I'm going to hit Command A or Control A for all, and then Command C to copy that. And I'm just going to close this because I'm going to paste this into my background. So I'm going to go to Edit, Paste Special, Paste Into, and that'll put my background behind her. Now I've got to size it accordingly, so I'm going to hit Command T, but notice again the background extends way beyond the rest of the image, so Command or Control 0 lets me see how big that background is. I want to size it more appropriately to her, so I'm going to bring it I think something about like this maybe. Yeah, that's good. So I hit Return, and it places the background in my image. Alright, so remember that high pass filter we used when we were dealing with Tom before? I'm going to create a stack for this. Again, Alt, Merge Visible, and I'm going to run that high pass filter that we just ran because I want to grunge up that background a little more. I hit OK, kind of a cool image all by itself, and change it to overlay. Now, it's made her hair stick out more, it's made the background more grungy, but it's also done it to her skin, which I don't necessarily want to happen. So I'm going to create myself a blank layer, or a mask rather, to that. Get my brush. I could do this again kind of roughly. I'm going to put black in the foreground to hide, and I'm at 80%, so I'm going to work there. And I just get her face and her arms so that they're not having that effect applied to them. Alright, so now her eyes definitely deserve the eye treatment, so let's go ahead and do this. And again, if you guys have to leave, I am going to run about 10 minutes over. So again, this will be recorded, so you'll get to watch this at your leisure. Alright, so again, what do I do for the eyes? First thing I'm going to do is do that crazy saturation adjustment. I'm going to add a lot of saturation. And I'm just again looking at the eyes, don't care about anything else. I'm going to fill the mask with black to hide it. Put white back in the foreground. Give myself a tiny little brush, and I want to make those eyes really pop. So again, I just start to paint with white, and you can see it's subtle because in this case her eyes were in shadow, so there was not a lot of saturation in them. So it's just adding a little bit of color. And again, we've got some nice catch lights because we used lights on her here. So after this, let's go ahead and see the whole image. Yep, looking good. Need to bring out the catch lights a little bit more. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to edit, fill with 50% gray again, change it to an overlay. And again, remember, anywhere we paint with white will get lighter, anywhere we paint with black will get darker. So put white in the foreground, get my brush, make it tiny. In this case, I've got the catch light actually in her pupil. I'm going to add a little bit more to the side of her iris. And again, the exit point just opposite that, I'm going to lighten that up a little bit. Same thing over here. In this case, it's in the iris. Add a little bit to the other side. And this is very subtle. You don't see a whole lot happening, but it's going to be dramatic when we back off. So here's 100%, and look what we just did to those eyes. Here's where we started. That's where we started. That's where we finished off. It's really an amazing difference. Alright, one more thing I'm going to do to this. I want to take this one step further. I'm going to bring in something else. I'm going to open another image. And let's see. Let's get something kind of grungy. Look at this. I'm going to open up this kind of stone background. I've already got the clarity driven up. Exposure's good. I'm going to add a little more contrast to it. Alright, and I'm going to open this image. I'm going to bring down the resolution a bit. Again, I'm going really quickly because I'm out of time. But again, you can watch this at your leisure in the recording. Alright, so I've got my just stone background here. I'm going to copy, select all and copy, and then just close this. And I'm going to paste right over the top of the entire image. Just hit Command V, and it's going to throw that right over top. And I'm going to change this image to an overlay. And watch what it's going to do to the image. Now, by itself, it's already kind of cool. Really kind of a cool effect. But I do want to bring most of her skin back. So I'm going to create a mask on that and get my brush nice and big. And I'm going to start at about 50%. And I'm going to go over her skin. Oh, I need to go black because it's a white mask. And just start to bring her skin back. I may decide in some places to actually leave the texture showing through. Depends on the look you're after. This probably would work better on a guy if you wanted to leave this much texture, but you can see it kind of made her face look like it's kind of stone, which if that's the look you're going for, it is kind of cool. But I'm going to bring it down a little more. I don't want to make her look too much like kind of Frankenstein's bride here, because she won't talk to me if I do that. And I'm just going to leave a very little hint of it and take it away from the inside of her arms a little, although I do kind of like it there as well. And then I'm going to, actually the other thing you could try, if you find your textures when you do these overlays are a little too extreme, change it from overlay to soft light. It's a less contrasty version, and you can see it makes it a little bit more subtle. And you can decide maybe if you like that better. All depends on what you're going for. I'm not sure which one I like better. Yeah, I have to admit I do kind of like the heavier one, but we'll go soft light for this one. Last thing, I need to dodge burn this. Now I don't care about the street lights, they're blown out and they kind of deserve to be, that's fine. What I'm going to do is create one more blank layer, change it to overlay. Now that filling with gray part is optional. You don't have to do it. I fill with gray so I can show you guys where I'm painting. But if I just paint with white and black on a blank overlay layer, the effect is going to be the same. So what I'm going to do is I want to darken this area a little bit, and I want to lighten up just this band across her eyes. So let's do the eyes first, and I'm going to work it again 10 to 20%. Let's try 20 and see if it's not too much. And yeah, I'm just going to do a band across her eyes and then go at 10% just to open up underneath them a little bit. Then I'm going to put black in the foreground, and I'm going to go 30% and just want to darken up this background here. All right, I think I like it. Let's take a look at this full screen. Whoops. And see what we've wrought. Kind of a cool image. And we bring up the layers so you can see our before and after. So again, here's where we started. And we've completely changed, obviously, the mood of the image. But very cool stuff and really makes for a dramatic image. I think she'll actually, I think she'll like this. So let's close that, and I got to finish up. I still have more images I could show you, but we're out of time for today. So let's kind of summarize. So again, that first image I did was a little bit of an image rescue. I did that to show if you did not have a flash, that you could kind of edit it as if there was a flash. I had to do some color correction. I had to add some catch lights to the eyes. It's best to get the best image right at capture because you want to enhance. You don't want to have to try to rescue. Secondly, I really need to make it clear if you're not calibrating and profiling your monitor. All the kind of stuff I did, with maybe the exception of the last one, which was a little bit on the freakier side anyway, all the things I did, I knew that the image I was seeing on the screen was correct. I know that that is what is going to happen when I go to print. And in order to pull that off, you got to know your monitor's calibrated and profiled. So make sure you're doing that. As I mentioned, this has been recorded, and when we do the recording, I'll make one master recording from both sessions. So the recording is actually going to be like 2 hours long, close to it. But it will have the demonstrations I did this morning also, which are also step by step. So again, the whole theme of this was to make sure that you're not guessing, that you know what you're doing, that you know what you're seeing on the screen is accurate so that you can get a print back that looks like what you saw on the screen. If you have a question that I did not get to that's driving you nuts, send me an email. Send it to answers@xritephoto.com. I'll do my best to get you an answer as soon as possible. And once again, I want to thank our sponsor, X-Rite, for all their help in making these webinars available to you guys. Definitely take a look at xritephoto.com. There's a lot of great information there. And as I mentioned, if some of the color management stuff is new to you, check out the webinar archive. I have done a handful of webinars on making sure your image comes out looking like. So that's it for me today. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thanks for the great questions. I hope to see you online again soon. So until next time, everybody have a great week and be well. Bye-bye.